Right, let's get started. Welcome everybody to the SIG and Code for Vault webinar, Avoiding a False Sense of Cybersecurity. And today we have in the studio, we have Yiannis Kanellopoulos and Asma Oualmakran. And in Greece, we have joining Elias Vafiadis. Welcome
Hi, Tibor.
everybody. Hello. Elias,
Hello,
could you
Tibor.
give a short introduction?
Yes, of course. My name is Elias Vafiadis. I have experience of almost 20 years in IT and telecommunications. I started my career as developer with focus on billing and payment applications for OTE and OTE subsidiaries, and then advanced in a technical project management role, specializing in digital projects. Since 2018, I assumed the role of quality assurance chapter leader in OTE, with vision to lead teams and create a culture of quality and continuous improvement for our deliverables. Our team handles many aspects of quality, such as streamlined unified testing process, test case execution automation, test data preparation tools and processes. Of course, automated source code evaluation for maintainability, quality, and security, and fast and effective release and aftercare support after deployment to production.
Very good. We're very happy to have you here today.
Me
You
too.
have a great use case for us, which we hear later about in the webinar. Let's move over to Yiannis. Yiannis.
Hi, Tibor. I'm Yiannis. I'm founder and CEO of Code for Thought. Code for Thought started in 2018, and we're specializing in evaluating any kind of software system, the technical quality of it, from traditional ones to the so-called AI systems these days. Prior that, I was also working for SIG, so I'm quite familiar with the domain of software quality and code analysis and security, and I'm really looking forward for today's webinar.
Yes, very good. Happy to have you here. Asma?
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me here. I'm Asma, and I'm a software consultant at SIG. So currently, my role is mainly helping clients identify risks in their system, doing security analysis, but also help them implement mitigations and also SAST tooling in their pipelines.
All right. Yeah, very good. So my name is Tibor Lapikas. I'm a director for partners and manage the partner relations, for example, with Code for Vault. So let's get started. So today we want to talk about a false sense of cybersecurity. What is a very common practice to do around cybersecurity, and where do we feel that you can enrich that experience, improve your cybersecurity posture by introducing SAST? I want to start off by quoting some reports which stress the importance of making sure that you have your security process in order. A report by IBM stated that in 2023, data breaches cost US businesses an average of $4.4 million per incident, which of course is a really high amount. If you structure it in terms of data, more than 10 terabytes of data are stolen monthly in the EU, which is an enormous amount. This was in a report by European Commission. And if you look at the UK, 32% of UK businesses have experienced a cyber breach or attack in the last year alone. So I think the urgency of this is very clear. The question is now, how do you best approach this? To kick off this this webinar, to prepare it, we put a poll on LinkedIn, and we asked, in your opinion, whose responsibility is cybersecurity within an organization? The answers that we provided were security teams, software development teams, or everyone in the organization, or other. We've got the results here, right? And 78% said everyone in the organization. 3% or so 8% said the security teams, and 11% said software development teams. So Asma, when you hear these numbers, does this surprise you? Does this resonate with what you see in the industry?
Mostly yes. So currently, the mentality shift really happened from putting all responsibility in one group to everyone, which is when we see in practice really positive evolution, because everyone has a specific role to play in securing software as an overall product, of course. The first thing to do, of course, is make sure that you build secure software. And that begins with the developers. But the developers need enablers to be able to keep writing secure software, but also detect issues on the long track. And the second part is where that team leads, POs come in, and they have to provide an environment where the devs can actually fix those issues, and they have the time and the resources for that. And then on a higher level, we want investment in tooling and support for training, for example, for those development teams.
Yeah, that's very clear. And Yiannis, is this something you talk to management a lot? Is this also that you see reflected? Does this also fully land, for example, when you talk to management?
The result of this poll, definitely they coincide. So when we talk with management, they realize that the responsibility for security is across the organization. Now, when you talk about software engineers and directors in this, let's say, division within an organization, they realize that they also need to do their bit, but they need to be empowered. They need to cultivate this habit and this culture within their teams, and they need support. Support might mean tooling, training, knowledge, talent.
Yeah, okay, no, that's very clear. And I also noticed that in the industry, I think this really has changed from a couple of years ago. It's much more seen as a common responsibility, which is clear. But we're also here, I think, to talk a bit about what do you then need, right? If it's a common responsibility from a tool-based approach, what would you need there? And I think it's good to start with sort of defining what we're talking about. Especially a couple of years ago, you would often hear like, oh yeah, we're all set. We do a pen test, right? We're done. Maybe to start understanding what those terms mean, Asma, could you elaborate? What is a pen test or penetration test, and how does it relate to SAST and SEA?
Yeah, so pen test is actually, in security sense, one of the tests that's most often used to test security. And to explain it in bit in layman terms is a check to see if your front door is locked. That's a pen test. So can you actually enter whatever you want to enter? And as a good test to see if the overall security from the outside in is how it should be. But then what does happen if somebody is able to enter? That is where that SCA and SAST come in. So for SAST, the main goal is to check weaknesses in the system, vulnerabilities. So you're strong as the weakest link is here the main message. So you want to be able to identify those weak spots in your system. So in general, a SAST tool will scan your system on different code patterns, and those code patterns might then be used in an attack to enter further move into the system to get to the most valuable part of the system, and that's the database, the information that you want to reach. The SCA is also part of that, but from a different sense. There we actually look at what external libraries that you might be using, and also try to find the impact if there are weaknesses in those libraries. So if you want to cover most part of it, you should use actually the combination of the three. So first, check if your front door is locked. Second, what happens when somebody enters? And thirdly, do I import some vulnerabilities from the outside?
Yeah, that's very clear. And that also is, I think, an important statement here. We're not talking about either or, right? It should be all of them. But at least we think that SAST and SEA, which is maybe good to explain as static application security testing, where you look at actually risks in the source code itself. You analyze the source code. SCA, software composition analysis, where you look at the dependencies in the code itself, which require a little more attention in enterprises that we see, but they also have their own place more in the front of the development process, and we will talk a little bit more about that later. Yiannis, when you talk to clients and also implement SAST at clients, what do you usually tell them when you are introducing this concept next to pen test?
We started the story about the fundamentals. So we start from the source code. In most of our clients, we were already helping them to improve, let's say, the maintainability of the code. So the easiness of the code to change, to adapt to new requirements or to fix bugs. And the last years that security is becoming way more important. We are working together with them in order to educate them of what secure coding means, what are the main elements and the main aspects, and then what is the tooling, the proper tooling that will help them.
Yeah.
That's the first part. The second part is that we set the guidelines together with them, and our experience shows that the guidelines need to be simple, because the life of a software engineer is difficult, right? I mean, he has a lot of things on his plate, so he has to react to security findings in a very fast way. But when it comes also to management, let's say the main argument is that the sooner you fix security issues in your development lifecycle, the cheaper it will get and the more secure you're going to make your system. Because the later you find those security bugs, and usually those bugs and vulnerabilities are being found in the penetration test, which is a little bit before the deployment or after the deployment of the system into production, then everything becomes way more expensive.
Yeah. So the very common theme here, shift left, let's find those security issues as soon as possible. As my question, so is it always the case that if you employ SAST, you don't need a pen test anymore? Or what is the difference? What can SAST find versus what can a pen test find?
Yeah, SAST, with all automated tooling, you cannot find everything. You have a spectrum of items that you can find, because some things need to be checked manually.
Yeah.
So that's one part. I would still advise to use both, but still see them as different facets, and also see them as applications on a different time. So the advantage of using SAST tooling is the earliness of detecting things. So you don't have to have a compiling system, for example. So even if you have a bare bone application, you can already do SAST scanning and already find vulnerabilities. Penetration tests are important, like right before releasing a major version, or like if you do a major changes in your security mechanism in your system, then it's really interesting to do a pen test also before you deploy. But recurring tests is also key here. So the same way that you recur unit tests, regression tests, that's actually the same way that you use these toolings in your life cycle.
Yeah, so what you're actually saying here is that SAST testing should actually be part of all your testing,
Yes.
right? You're also testing for performance, for reliability, for overall quality. Let's make security testing a part of that, and you can include them. What's maybe also important to mention that we also found relations between high quality code having less issues with security, low quality code. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, so I've seen it in practice. So I have had teams where I did an evaluation on their code base, and they were not really security aware in a sense. So they were aware of, okay, I need to have authentication, I need to have hashing, but they weren't really aware about secure coding practices. But they were really, really keen on general software engineering practices. And just implementing those practices, you saw that the quality of the code was really high, because it was a well-built system. But a lot of software engineering practices are also including software practices, which then also makes a lot easier to kind of have a pattern detection in your system. But also, the moment that I found a vulnerability, it was just a question of like, I need a few hours to fix this, and then next commit, we have a bug fix.
Yeah, and it ties in nicely with what Yiannis said, the between quotes advantage of security issues compared to quality issues, that once found, they can usually be resolved pretty quickly, especially if you do this early in the lifecycle phase. Yiannis, how did you approach introducing a culture change within those teams? Because they might be used to, hey, security, it's not directly something I do. We see the pen test at the end. Now they have to work. It might require extra time in the beginning. How do you address this?
We start by educating them and explaining them the value of secure coding. That's one. The second is we involve them in creating the guidelines or the best practice together with us. So we come in an organization, in a team, we propose certain guidelines also in line to the tooling, but we have also the developers to subscribe to them. So we have their buy-in. And the most important thing, we try to keep things simple. So guidelines that somebody can understand and can implement them in a simple way. As I said, developers are pretty busy and their main focus is delivering functionality and features to the business, which means that the rest needs to be very well laid out and very well explained to them so they can react in an easy manner. Sorry.
That's actually interesting. So you mentioned it's not just introducing the SAST tooling itself, but also setting the guidelines and the expectations so they don't get swamped with all the findings, but they know what to focus on.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And that's an interesting point. When you turn on SAST tooling, there's often many findings. What is your general recommendation in dealing with prioritization? How do you prioritize them and make sure that you spend times on the vulnerabilities that matter?
It takes some practice. For instance, our team is who's working with several clients. You accumulate all this knowledge and then you refine it, and then you know what is more relevant for each type of system or for each client. That's the first. So learning from all those clients and then applying this knowledge to an individual case or client. That's the one. The second is that you need to do that because the teams are not going to react in long lists of findings.
No.
So you have to learn by doing the refinement, and sometimes you have to help the teams to do this refinement also by themselves if needs be. For instance, we have a client that says whenever I receive a list of violations in an Excel spreadsheet and it's more than 10 kilobytes, I don't open it.
Yeah.
So that's where we come to play. And by knowing what is more relevant, then we help the teams prioritize.
Yeah. So guidelines and clear prioritization helps teams become effective when using a SAST. Absolutely. Let's move also a little bit more to when and where to use SAST, Asma. So where should you implement in your development pipeline, in your development process, SAST, and how do you make sure that developers can be as effective as possible when using this type of tooling?
Yeah, it helps to see SAST as a type of automated peer review. So each time you do a peer review, it would be also a good time to do a security scan, for example. It keeps the increments small, yeah, so you don't generate hundreds of findings after you build half a product, which also keeps the things more actionable. And also, to be more effective, you want to make sure that the information is easily available for the developer. So it needs to be easily available, and also the information must be complete. So they need to be able to understand what the issue is, and they need to be able to actually take action upon that. In my point of view is the moment you do a peer review or you do your unit tests, also includes some security scanning, and that can be like partial scans, full scans, depending on where you are in your life cycle.
And that's actually interesting that you say this. When you talk about partial scans, can this be actually at the commit level where a developer commits something and it's also checked for security? Are we already at that level that we can do it that early?
Yeah, there are toolings that have quality gates that the moment you push code, it scans for maintainability and for security. And you can even say the moment you have the security finding you have in that piece of code is critical, you're not allowed to merge into the main branch. So there are multiple tools that actually allow to do that.
Yeah, I think that's about as shift left as you can go.
Yes.
How, in your experience, how difficult is it to maintain that tooling? Are we already at the level we set it up, we integrate, and it works? Or does it, for example, require regular maintenance, which will increase the burden on the development team?
Yeah, maintenance with tooling, you always will have some type of maintenance. In the sense you need to update the tool, for example, and that's a part of the maintenance, but that can be shifted towards an infrastructure team, for example. I think in my experience, the most time is actually put into initializing it. So the moment it runs, then you need to make small changes left and right. So for example, the tooling works with a rule set. So it detects multiple findings depending on which pattern it's detecting. In some cases, some patterns might be present in your system, but it's not a real vulnerability because of context, business context, or you just need to have that pattern in your system. Then you can choose to actually remove that rule from the scanning because it's creating too much noise. But once you are past that initializing phase and you have like regular checks on updates and so on, then it should be really low effort to keep it going.
And we call this assessment of security findings also triage, right? What should we do with this? Do we accept the risk? Do we actually resolve this? Is this something that an experienced developer, but with not too much security experience, can do? Does tooling already provide enough insight to do this, or would you recommend in any team also have a security expert which can do and help with those triages?
Most findings, so I've seen that devs are like really aware about, like, if you explain the issue and you explain the impact, they really understand what's the core of the issue. So that's not a real problem there. But sometimes you have more complex vulnerabilities in there that have multifaceted attack vectors. Then it might be necessary to have like a security expert there. So a security team is always valuable. They are the specialist, and they can really support the team into really get that security top notch and proper installed in the process. But they're also a knowledge base that they can kind of use to kind of spitball some ideas. Like I have this vulnerability and I'm not sure how to implement a mitigation. I would propose this. Then a security team is really valuable to help and support that security team. Yeah.
So SAST tooling does certainly not replace security experts, but it can help them scale their knowledge and enable their development teams to work with security issues while they provide the expertise in there. Very clear.
Actually, if I can complement, SAST tooling can be a bridge between the two departments, the software or the two worlds, the software developers and the security department. It is a very nice way for these two worlds to come together and work, because what we realize is that sometimes there is a disconnect between a security department and the application development department. And for us, this should not be the case. They should communicate with each other. It should be connected, exchange knowledge. And that will, because as we said, security is the responsibility for everyone in the organization. So there needs to be open lines of communication between security departments and developers.
Yeah, and that's actually interesting. So it's not just the open lines in the organization itself, but also what Asma mentioned is that the results of that scanning should be broadly available so that anyone who has the specific expertise can join in and triage that specific
It's
result.
the knowledge exchange also.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yep. Okay, very clear. So I'd like to move on to our case study. We actually, Yiannis, you have done with Elias, I think, the implementation of SAST over the years. Elias, can you explain a little bit about OT itself, what it does, why there was a need for SAST tooling, and how you went about this the past years?
Yes, of course. A couple of words for OTE. OTE is the largest technology company in Greece. It's a member of Deutsche Telekom Group. In 2023, OTE employed 10,000 people. OTE offers a wide range of services: fixed line and mobile telephony, broadband services, pay TV, and integrated ICT solutions. The group is also active in real estate, as well as in payments, online food delivery, and digital insurance market. Abroad, the group operates in the mobile communication market of Romania. We had the need in order to enhance our software lifecycle and how we produce our software. We operate in a complex environment with over 50 vendors creating code. So we took the decision back in 2017 to proceed with static code analysis for maintainability. Very soon, we have seen the value with the information we started to gain about the findings on the code, and we decided to start scaling in two directions. The first one was to start upload our critical systems, our core systems, and evaluate the code for findings. That was the one part. The other part was to start expanding in bigger scope, adding security analysis, performance analysis, cloud readiness. As of now, we monitor 30 of our core systems, and we aim to reach 50 in the next 2 years. I have to say that we have significant successes with static code analysis from the quality perspective, apart from the continuous improvement in our maintainability. We have managed to gain two UVIT certifications, and in security, in a very short period of time, we managed to close any high or critical issue identified in our system. So we have, let's say, very good results in our case, and we continue for new things.
Very interesting. And we talked about, or Yiannis talked about, also building a culture within the development teams where they become more responsible for those findings itself.
Mhm.
How did it work out? Can you maybe also tell a little bit about the scope? How many teams were involved in this, and how did they approach that change?
Okay, I believe that there is a direct benefit with SAST analysis that you have the findings, you start improving the code by fixing them, and there is, let's say, an indirect benefit, which is building a quality and security culture that is cultivated within the organization. In our case, this worked by creating additional custom tools for scanning sensitive information within the code. We create documents for informed developers and educate them to write secure code. We created vendor management policy regarding development code. And we have, apart from, let's say, using the tools, we have established a process where we use the findings as input, and with weekly meetings per team. We prioritize the findings, we identify the risk, there is technical consultancy and knowledge sharing between the key stakeholders. And I believe that the main benefit is that we cultivated a culture of quality and security overall.
Very good to hear. And that's interesting how that not just changes, right, the way you assess security, but it also changes security. Yiannis, you were involved from the start. Can you elaborate a bit from how you viewed this process from your side?
It was a gradual process, and we worked closely. We started with one single system back in the days with our team. At that time, it was Alex Zaharopoulos and Ravis Gopal from our side. And we scaled now to more than 40 systems. We started with maintainability, and soon as the teams were getting the hang of it, they were asking for more. So we realized that when you start raising the bar and the developers are kind of feeling encouraged because they see they're improving things, they start asking for more. So security was the next inevitable step, especially for sensitive systems. And that's how we progressed.
And that's actually interesting, and we see that more in our the delivery that we do. Is it sometimes helps to have a sort of front runner team that really is more on top of things, has more experience. Is this also something that happened at OTE?
Yes, you have, let's say, your champions. You have the people who are adopted. They like it. They're adopting it. They make it their own knowledge and their own thing. And then there is a spillover effect because you start creating, let's say, if I may say, an internal competition or an internal benchmark, and then engineers they like the challenge. If they see somebody is doing something great, the rest they would like to follow. They don't want to be lagging behind.
Yeah, and that's actually interesting. A question for Elias here is that we tend to frame this as, oh, this is another thing we have to do. But what we sometimes see, if you have proper reporting and you see actually the number of critical issues go down, this can actually be a very stimulating thing to do. Is that also an effect you noticed with your development teams?
In our case, yes. And as I said before, the benefit goes in two directions. The first one, that we started seeing a downtrend in our, let's say, how many security findings we had in the code, and we managed to maintain a good pace in fixing those issues. So we knew that findings that perhaps couldn't be found by other ways of analysis, we have found them with SAST tools, and we managed to solve them. That was the one benefit. The other benefit was that we knew that we have a process that identifies risk. We exchange knowledge between development teams, QA engineers, consultants, prioritization and improvement plan. All this consist of, let's say, a holistic approach that has benefits to the findings, the code, the actual code, and also the people.
Can you share something about the guidelines that you built? Did you have very straightforward guidelines, say no critical issues at all? Should it be triaged? What approach did you took there in setting the rules for the analysis?
Okay, first of all, we focused based on the issue's criticality. We focused on high and critical issues. Then, of course, we focused on systems that are critical for the business. And third, we focused on systems that are, let's say, more sensitive from security perspective, customer facing, and that kind of, let's say, critical systems. Apart from that, as a spin-off action from the team was to build a document that was consists of security guidelines in all aspects of security, of how to write secure code, and this was sent to the teams. Either these teams were internal or there were external teams, vendors, on how they should write secure code.
Very interesting to hear. And of course, such a process is never completely without some hurdles here and there. Were there some lessons learned where you say, well, if you are an new enterprise, someone listening here wants to start on a journey towards full SAST integration, what should he or she pay attention to?
Okay, my recommendation to teams that want to embed, let's say, SaaS tools in their life cycle, the first one is for sure 100% do it. The reason is that with SaaS tools, you gain information that, as I said before, perhaps you cannot get from other ways of testing. Based on our experience, in order to have very good results, apart from the tool, you will need a very well, let's say, defined process of handling those issues in order to get the maximum value of SAST, let's say, tools and processes. So to sum it up, from one perspective, very good SaaS tools in order to identify the findings. And at the second part, of course, a well-established process is needed by the collaboration, QA, security, development teams, management, of course.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's very clear. I want to ask Yiannis, you've, of course, helped multiple clients in Greece going through this journey. Let's talk a bit about requirements, right? What is required if you look, I think, at what we hear, the OTA was, I think, a very successful use case. What is requirement in terms of maturity at the client side before they start with this? Do they need to have certain processes already in place? Do they need to have certain concepts or organizational or maybe development structures ready before they can start with this?
Yes, by getting a tool and saying I'm gonna do SAST doesn't really solve any problem. I think the fundamental from a technical point of view is how good the code is. What is the quality? What is the maintainability of the code? Because if the team has the habit to, let's say, write good code, it's easier, let's say, to establish the necessary process for SAST. That's one. The second is that you need some support from the management. This is always, this is always a prerequisite. If management supports this kind of initiatives, um, then it is easier for them to succeed. The third one is to have clear expectations and goals from the start. So I hear several people saying we're going to do SAST. And when you ask them, okay, what is your goal? What are the things you would like to address? They say we don't know. They just deploy a series of tools and then they try to figure things out. So you need to have some basic idea of what you would like to achieve in the end of this process in order to start, let's say, motivating the teams and make them engaging the whole initiative. And one final thing which is important is that you have to realize that this is not going to be successful from day one. It needs time. It needs a learning curve for the teams to understand what are the main concepts of secure coding, what are the main ways to fix security issues. And last and definitely not least is the value of manual code reviews. I mean, SAST and SEA, software composition analysis, can take you up to a certain level. But if you don't sit together with your team, if you don't sit together with experts and you manually review the code, this will give you a tremendous benefit, because what we see from our experience is that usually more than 65 or 70% of the issues we see, the security issues, they are being identified during the manual review. So SAST, the automated part, can help you a lot because it will decrease the scope of the code you need to review. But definitely the manual review will help a lot. And this is something that the teams need to realize.
All right, that's very interesting. And is this something, Elias, that you also saw at OTE, that these things were really important, not just a tool, but really changing the processes and make sure it lands well within your organization?
Yes, of course. And what I would like to say is that it's not something that it is static. You have always reassure and recheck that the process is okay, and there is also always room for improvement.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. And when we come back also to the topic of this webinar, avoiding a false sense of security. So we identified, you should not only rely on pen test, but I think we can identify another one, which is also, it's not just installing a tool and you're done, right? And sometimes we also see this like, yeah, we have tool X or Y or Z, it doesn't even matter that tool. If it's just sitting there, nobody is let's say, analyzing the results, doing something with it, you're still exposed, right? And so
And
any tool, any SaaS tool needs to come with taking the organization, introducing processes, introducing guidelines, and also taking a little bit time for the learning curve.
yeah,
Yes,
plus you
exactly.
need,
And
go ahead, Ilya, sorry.
what I would like to say is that with SAST tool, it's what I used to say. It's just like pull the curtain and see what is beneath in the software. It's a victory by itself to know that these findings exist in the software, and probably we couldn't identify them with other ways. And in our case, we started improving our software in a way that prior to that, we didn't know that we could do it. And the first step of improvement is to turn on the light and start monitor the area that you want to improve. And SaaS tools help towards this direction.
Very clear. So we're moving into to the roundtable now, and I also want to address the audience here. So if, based on what you've heard, or you already thought this before the webinar, you have any questions to us, any of the speakers in the webinar, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them. So I want to move back a bit to Asma, talking about the mind, the focus of a developer when a developer is working on code. How difficult is it for a developer to already spot security issues when he or she is working on the code itself?
A lot of that depends on knowledge level. So when I just started that security, for me, identifying an SQL injection was really difficult because I need to really check, like, okay, is this present? Is that present? Yeah, the whole checklist of items I need to identify before I was now an SQL injection. I just have to look a second at it and I just can determine yes or no. So the same thing with developers. They first need to be aware of vulnerabilities that are possible in their code base. That's step one. Step two is then using supporting tools to identify those risks. And then after that, they're kind of an expert and they just can identify any type of risk and make also more complex connections throughout the whole code base to get those findings that SAST tooling will not identify. So for a dev, it's a whole journey. In the same way that it's a journey to become a software engineer, the same way that you will also need to learn how to do software security building.
Yeah, so what you're actually saying is that introducing SAST tools can also help start a learning process at the with the developer, because he or she's okay, I introduced a security issue there, but the next time he or she might know, okay, I have to change this. I know upfront what to do. So the actual findings might go down. Question for Yiannis and maybe also Elias here. I could imagine when you turn on this SaaS tooling for the very first time, you get a lot of results. How do you deal with this? How do you sort of absorb the shock and make sure that they don't say, wow, this is so much, where do we start?
It's the moment of truth, if I
Yeah.
may say. But us as consultants, it might be easier to digest that truth. But probably for Elias and his team, who are like, they have more skin in the game, might be a little bit shocking. Ilya, I'll say a couple of things and then you can
Okay, yes, of course.
complement. It might be a moment of truth, but it gives material for us to work together with the teams and good content. And as I said, if you are able also to provide guidance based on the findings, then you make the life of the teams easier. Also, one thing that we tend to say to our clients is that, okay, let's draw a red line of what happened in the past and let's just look how we can be better in the future, because the software developers work is changing, best practices are changing, so what we knew yesterday might not be known, might be irrelevant today. Something new is coming. So let's focus how we can be better and not just waste time saying, oh, why didn't we do that proper way 2 years ago, for instance.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
Tibor, very good question.
Yeah.
First of all is the realization and the knowledge that you gain that you can build software in a better ways, in a better way. There are findings you didn't know before, so there is a very valuable information. The second step is that you have something, you have to take action, you have something to do with these issues. Here comes the process that you need in order to mitigate the actual risk from these findings. And the third and very important is to start producing software without these findings in the past. And here comes to educate the teams and build the processes in order to start producing better software.
Yeah, very, very clear. Good addition indeed. So we've got a question from the audience, and I think I'll ask it first to Yiannis and then to Asma. So when you start the selection process for SaaS tooling, what are important aspects to look for?
First of all, the ability to provide as filtered findings as possible. Second, the aspects of SAST that the tool is covering. Third, which is very important if you ask me, is how easy is to monitor those findings and how they're progressing over time. And fourth, we always need to report to managers because they, at the end of the day, they sign the bills, they sign the contracts, and the ability of the tool to provide very digestible insights that the developer team can present to the management in order to understand how good or bad the situation is, or how the findings present themselves against regulations, for instance, PCI DSS or the upcoming DORA. These are important things for us in order to be able to select the proper tooling to do our job.
Yeah, and this comes back to the idea everybody in the organization is responsible. So it should also be able to report
Yes.
at a level that is relevant, at an aggregation that's relevant for everybody in the company. Asma, from a more technical point of view, what should a good SaaS tool provide?
First of all, it needs to support the language, your main language you're developing in, and preferably the whole tech stack. So if you have a very specific C application, for example, you want to have a tool that's really good at scanning C code, for example. A second thing, and it's more from a usability standpoint for the devs, is that the information must be easy to extract. So the whole process, the first part is getting the findings, and then you need to process those findings. And processing those findings most of the time means making tickets out of them for the backlog. So there needs to be a proper support to be able to do that. And then another thing that's really important is the information that the tool is reporting sufficient for the dev? If you have a security finding, is all information available to first either understand it from the response itself, but also is there enough information to actually look up extra standards or extra resources to be able to further engage in using that information for mitigations?
Yeah, that's very clear. We're already moving towards the end of this webinar. I want to do a sort of a last round with any, let's say, last statement recommendations, and I want to start with Elias. If you want to summarize the process, what you went through, what were your main recommendations that you would give to anyone considering this?
Okay, I believe that the heart of the discussion and our experience is that is to recognize that security exists in every aspect, let's say every thread of the development process, and towards this direction for building more secure and better products, adopting SaaS tools is a must. And on top, apart from using a SaaS tool, also a well-defined process is needed in order to identify, prioritize the improvement plan of the findings. So my recommendation was for sure use SaaS tools and build on top a good process to get the maximum value.
Very clear, very nice summary. Asma, if you look from the developer point of view, how can SaaS tools help developers be more productive and more secure?
Yeah, so first of all, good software engineering also takes security into aspect as part of the whole thing. SaaS tool will definitely help a developer to support them in the code reviews, first of all, and they will also help them to build more quality into the system. So every lesson, every reporting from a SaaS tool is a lesson learned, because next time you're not going to make that same vulnerability mistake. So it improves your abilities as software engineer, but also as a developer.
Very clear, thank you. Yiannis, so organizations embedding on this journey, what recommendations would you give to them?
Well, they have to realize that SAST is essential to improving their security posture. The success of any application of SAST tooling and habits also is dependent on the how good the code is. So the management needs to realize that the things that they were thinking were luxury to have, like good code some years ago, because the priorities, the business features, and going as fast as possible. This needs to change. So increasing your security posture, you need to pay attention to your code from a security point of view and maintainability point of view, and the software engineers need to be educated towards this direction.
All right, thank you, Yiannis, very clear. So I hope we've given you some insight that it's not just pen test, but it's not even just a SaaS tool. It requires time, guidance, processes on top of that to really properly implement SAST. And security is a process you're always working to improve. And hopefully we've given you some guidance. So from our studio in Amsterdam, thank you for joining, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.